Democratic presidential candidate Jay Inslee, climate activist. Governor, Joe Biden has admittedly an ambitious plan to fight global warming. It's got a price tag of $2 trillion. But if he wins, and even if the Democrats win the Senate, what chance does it have? Will it be too piecemeal, as far as you're concerned, to accomplish anything soon enough? Because he's talking about 2050. That's a long way going.
Well, I could not be more delighted by Joe Biden's ambitious plan. It's appropriately ambitious, and it's real. It's not just some pipe dream. He has put forth a plan that is both comprehensive and robust and practical, meaning we can actually do it. And the fundamental difference between Joe Biden and Donald Trump is that when Trump thinks of climate change, he thinks hoax. When Joe Biden thinks climate change, he thinks jobs. And his plan, I am so pleased, because I've been beating this drum now for a decade and a half, and now Joe Biden has put his ideas to paper, and it is going to grow jobs in steel for wind turbines, for electricians who are wiring electric charging stations for our cars, for sheet metal workers and carpenters who are rebuilding our homes so that they can be more energy efficient. There is no greater jobs program than fighting climate change. And to do that, you have to understand science to begin with. And look, the situation we face today is a president who ignores science and debases it, refuses to accept science on COVID because he cares more about hurting his election than hurting Americans, and science and climate change, where we have a candidate who embraces it, Joe Biden, and will turn it into a massive jobs program. I could not be more thrilled than the arrival of a candidate who's going to lead us with hopes about economic recovery, rather than the ones that would try to ignore science every chance he gets. And that's the situation with Donald Trump.
And how did you feel after the debate when people were immediately saying, okay, there goes Pennsylvania with fracking, there goes Texas, when he said he was going to end the oil industry? He later clarified to say he was going to end the subsidies. But do you think that it is still, really political hardware to even talk in those terms about climate in the debate?
This is a winning issue for Joe Biden because the people get it. They're not following this hogwash from Donald Trump. Look, I saw an ad for an electric Hummer the other day, okay? Every major car company understands the power of electric cars, and every major auto company is now making electric cars. They understand this is the future. It's actually the present. So does Joe Biden. So does a huge majority of the American people. And they understand that we can make electric cars here, and we want to make them here and not surrender that future manufacturing base to China or Germany or anywhere else. This is fundamentally a struggle to have an advanced manufacturing economy in the United States. And that's why Joe Biden is doing so well in Pennsylvania and many places. Look, he's not going to eliminate fossil fuels tomorrow. He does think, as I do, that we should no longer use taxpayer money to subsidize these big fossil fuel companies. And there will be a transition over decades to cleaner sources of energy. Americans get that. And the reason they get it is that we understand what that Donald Trump does not understand. We are an optimistic, technologically literate, scientifically oriented people that understand a good opportunity when we see it. And building this clean energy economy fundamentally is an economic opportunity as much as it is an environmental and health challenge. Joe Biden gets that. Donald Trump does not. We're going to start this progress next Wednesday morning.
I want to ask you also about the president's rhetoric on the trail. Last night in Lansing, Michigan, he was focusing on Senator Kamala Harris. And, well, let me play it for you and see what your reaction is.
If he gets elected 3 weeks into his presidency, they'll say, Kamala, you ready? Let's go. That's why they're talking about the 25th Amendment, right? 3 weeks. 3 weeks in, Joe shot. Let's go, Kamala. You ready?
So, I guess he's trying to demean Biden and also talk about Kamala Harris as vice president. But just the way he talks about both of them on the campaign trail. I mean, I guess the rhetoric is getting heated on both sides 6 days out, but still.
Well, Trump seems mystified why suburban women are voting against him like 2-1, and he seems mystified by that. Whereas he has an entire career demeaning and demoting the opportunities of women in our community, in businesses, in their home life, and everywhere else. And then he's mystified and he has to go begging. I heard him the other day sort of saying, you have to vote for me, you women of suburbia. Well, you know what? They're rejecting that very, very kind seduction by Donald Trump, because he has found every single way possible to demean the possibilities of strong women in our community. And Senator Harris is one of those strong women who represent a tremendous future and present in our American political leadership. And I could not be more pleased with her candidacy. And I could not be more understanding of the clarity of the difference of Joe Biden, who recognizes that strong leadership, and Donald Trump, who is a very insecure man who is threatened by strong women. I don't know how to put it more bluntly than that. And I'm looking forward to women voting against him on droves.
Well, okay, there you've got it. Governor Inslee, thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you.
And meanwhile, over in Texas.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.